I threw my 65th birthday party hoping to hold my family together one last time. No one came. 3 days later, I discovered my son, believed dead since 1968, was still alive. And the person who hid him for 50 years was my ex-husband. If you think this is just another family story, you're dead wrong. Subscribe now and don't miss a single shocking true life episode from us. Under the dimming sky of Burlington, Vermont, the maple leaves danced down like ashes from an invisible fire. The house at the end of Ellington Lane stood quiet wooden walls, faded to a soft gray, as though time itself had decided to pause there. It was a modest home, nothing grand, but filled with a kind of stubbornness, like the woman who sat under the front porch awning tapping rhythmically on an old Royal typewriter. Mildred Whitmore, 78, wore a wool cardigan over a faded blouse, her silver hair pinned tightly in a bun. Her fingers moved with deliberate slowness, not from frailty, but from reverence. The machine was old, maybe older than the daughter she never really raised, and the granddaughter who never really knew her, but it still worked. Each clack of the key struck not just the ribbon, but some ghostly bell inside her. A sound from another life classrooms, chalk dust, grammar lessons, children's eyes wide with curiosity and hope. Now only the crows answered. Inside the house, the smell of cedar and paper lingered. Shelves lined with books leaned forward like old friends eager to whisper secrets. Dozens of framed photos and letters surrounded her desk like a fortress, some in black and white, some yellowed with age, a few cracked at the edges. She wasn't typing anything in particular, just letting her fingers recall the cadence of language. It soothed her. In the silence of late autumn, words were company. Then from the edge of the driveway came the unmistakable sound of tires crunching gravel. She didn't turn her head. She didn't need to. It was the Toyota Corolla with the faulty brake that always screeched before it stopped. Mildred exhaled, not a sigh, something colder. Brenda. The car door slammed with less force than the last time, but enough. Footsteps, quick and impatient, echoed up the porch steps. Jesus, it's freezing, Brenda muttered, wrapping her faux fur coat tighter. She didn't wait for an invitation. You should really get the furnace checked, Mom. Mildred kept typing, one more word, then another, then a period. Only then did she lift her eyes. Brenda had the kind of face that always looked like it was about to correct someone. 48 years old, all sharp lines and soft eyes that had long forgotten how to smile without calculation. Behind her trailed Lucy, 19, pale-freckled, more fragile than her mother, but just as unreadable. She gave a half-hearted wave, more out of reflex than warmth. I brought tea, Lucy said, holding up a paper cup from Duncan. It's cinnamon apple. Thank you, darling, Mildred said. Her voice was dry, but not brittle. She took the cup and set it aside, untouched. Brenda walked to the doorframe, crossing her arms. We don't have much time. Lucy's got her MRI later today, and I've got to meet with Dr. Paulson at 3. Mildred didn't ask why they had come if they were so busy. She knew. Brenda pulled a folder from her purse. We need to talk about the house. No, Mildred said before Brenda even opened the flap. You don't even know what I do. Brenda paused, her lips twitching into something halfway between a frown and a smirk. You think I'm here to take something from you? You are, Mildred said, finally turning the typewriter off. You want me to sign something. Again. Like last spring. And the summer before. Brenda took a breath, steadying herself. It's different this time. Lucy's condition is getting worse. The insurance barely covers half. We need the money, Mom. I'm not your mother, Mildred said softly. Brenda stiffened. Lucy looked down at her feet. I raised myself, Brenda snapped. Don't forget that. You raised yourself, Mildred echoed. But you didn't learn compassion. Silence settled in like fog. Brenda opened the folder anyway, laying a crisp contract across the porch table. Just read it. Please. We'd get a good price. It's a seller's market. We already talked to an agent. They'd let you stay with us, or we can find a... I am not moving into a back room to be watched like an infant. Mildred's voice hardened. And I won't be guilted into selling the only place I've ever belonged. Brenda looked to Lucy for backup, but the girl wouldn't meet her eyes. We could finally fix Lucy's scoliosis, Brenda said. You've seen her pain. You know what it does to her sleep, to her walking. She's 19, Mom. She's just starting out. I don't doubt the pain, Mildred said, eyes still on Lucy. But this house isn't the cure. I didn't raise Lucy to be a liar, Brenda snapped. No, Mildred replied. You raised her to be afraid to speak. Brenda's hand trembled slightly as she shoved the folder back into her bag. You think you're being noble, but you're just being stubborn, alone in this freezing tomb of a house typing to no one. What legacy is that? I'm not leaving, Mildred said. Brenda stood frozen for a moment, then to Lucy. Get in the car. Lucy hesitated, looked once more at Mildred, then turned and walked back down the porch. Brenda lingered at the doorway. You'll regret this. No, Mildred said, returning to her seat. But you might. The car started. Tires reversed down the gravel. Silence returned. Almost. A wind picked up scattering red leaves across the wooden steps. Mildred sat still, eyes fixed on the typewriter. Something inside her hurt, but it wasn't new. It had hurt for decades. She reached for her cup of tea. Cold. She didn't drink it. That night the wind howled louder. Inside the house, darkness fell like a curtain. Mildred sat at her writing desk, slippers on flannel shawl over her shoulders. She hadn't turned on the TV in years. Didn't need the noise. Instead, she lit a single lamp, its golden glow casting long shadows across the shelves. Then the sound. Tap. She turned. Nothing. She leaned forward, narrowing her eyes. Tap, tap, tap. It came from the study. From the typewriter. Her hands began to tremble just slightly. She walked down the hallway, past the ticking clock, past the silent fireplace. When she reached the room, she paused at the door. The typewriter was there, alone, exactly as she had left it. And then, clack, a key depressed on its own. Then another, and another. Clack, clack, clack. She stepped forward slowly until she could see the paper. Letters emerged one by one. Her name in her handwriting. Then a date, October 4th, 1968. Then a sentence. If something happens to Walter, don't believe what they tell you. Her knees weakened. The page finished with a flourish. A signature. Hers. And yet she had never written this. She stared at the paper, hands clenching at her sides. The room felt colder now. Or maybe it was the words. Outside, the wind continued its lonely song. And inside, under the faint glow of an antique lamp, the past had finally decided it had waited long enough. Under a slate-gray sky, the morning after Mildred stood at the base of the attic ladder, one hand on the wall for balance, the other gripping the frayed pull cord. It had been years, maybe 15, since she last ascended into that wooden stomach of her house. She told herself it was just to check something, just to confirm. But deep down she knew the machine hadn't lied, or maybe it had. Maybe she was losing it. Old age could be cruel like that, turning memory into fog, rearranging the past like a stack of unfiled papers. But when a typewriter started writing letters from a year you swore you never wrote, your choices narrowed. Either you listened to the ghosts, or you joined them. She pulled the cord. With a groan of wood and springs, the attic ladder extended downward, as reluctant as she was. Dust floated in the golden beam, slicing through the cracked ceiling vent. Each step creaked under her weight as she climbed the air thick with mothballs and insulation in time. She reached the top and paused. A single naked bulb hung from a string. She yanked it. The light sputtered once, twice, then held. The attic looked like a shrine to everything that had ever been put off. Boxes of old report cards framed degrees, a rolled-up rug with a coffee stain from 1974. In the far corner, beneath a stack of costume jewelry and broken umbrellas, was an old army trunk. Her hands hesitated over the latch. Not because it was hard, just because she remembered that trunk. Walter's initials were carved faintly in the metal. Near the lock, WRW. Walter Raymond Whitmore. She undid the latch. Inside was a mess of envelopes, newspaper clippings, and curled black and white photographs. The first thing she saw was a kindergarten drawing, a smiling stick figure holding hands with a woman labeled Mommy. The paper had yellowed, the colors had faded, but the shape was still clear. She reached further in and pulled out a small cloth-bound folder, something official. Her hands trembled. A birth certificate. Walter Raymond Whitmore. Born July 12, 1963. Mother Mildred Josephine Whitmore. Father Raymond E. Whitmore. Her breath caught. The document was intact, crisp, but there was something else tucked behind it. A folded, unsent letter. She opened it with the caution of someone who knows exactly how badly words can hurt. October 3rd, 1968. Raymond. I'm writing this in case I'm wrong. Maybe it's the stress. Maybe it's my paranoia. But I've started watching how Gloria looks at Walter. She carries him like luggage. She doesn't speak to him unless she has to. I've told you this before, but you don't listen. She's not fit to be around him. There's something in her eyes, Ray. Something cold. If anything happens and you're not around, please know that I tried. I tried to protect him. I'm not imagining this. Mildred. She sat there, the letter in her lap, a hollowness forming behind her ribs. She remembered Gloria, 23, hired through the church, never really smiled. She'd been there 6 weeks. Then Walter disappeared. The official story was that he wandered off. The police said the dog had gotten out. Walter followed it and must have fallen into the ravine. They never found a body, only one of his shoes and a piece of blue corduroy near the fence line. She had believed it, or tried to. But now the machine was writing. The letter existed. The dots connected, however faintly. And if the machine wasn't lying, maybe neither were her fears. Later that day, after changing into her brown wool coat and pressing the collar flat, she walked 3 blocks to the police station. She hadn't been inside since 1981 when her purse was stolen at the post office. The front desk was manned by a young officer with an eager smile and no memory older than his last coffee. Afternoon, ma'am, can I help you? I'm looking for a cold case file from 1968. He blinked. Do you have a case number? No. Victim name. Walter Raymond Whitmore. He was 5. The officer typed something on the computer, eyes narrowing. Any idea where the report was filed? Was it here in Burlington? Yes. 1 moment. He disappeared behind a partition. A few minutes later, a heavier-set officer in his 50s came out. His badge read, Sergeant Kellerman. Ms. Whitmore, he asked. She nodded. I'm sorry, but we lost a lot of records from that era in the flood of 73. Basement archives got soaked. It was a mess, mold rot, the whole thing. Some of it was transferred to microfilm, but it's spotty. No backups. Kellerman shook his head. Not from that far back. We didn't digitize anything until the 90s. I checked. There's no formal file listed for Walter Whitmore, just a missing persons notice in a local newspaper from that October. She stood there staring. Kellerman softened. If you think there's foul play, we could reopen a preliminary inquiry, but without evidence, it'd be hard to get traction. I understand, she said. But what she meant was, I'm done waiting for the system to remember my son. That night, she sat in the study staring at the typewriter again. It had done nothing all day. Silent. Still. Like a performer between acts. She whispered, Who are you talking to? It didn't answer. But something shifted. A hunch, a nudge. Mildred reached for the telephone book. Still paper. Still alphabetical. Private investigators, 4 listings. She called the 3rd, no answer. The 4th, a woman's voice, calm, slightly hoarse. This is Megan Frost. I need help, Mildred said. The line crackled. Go on. I'm trying to find someone, my son. He went missing 56 years ago. There was a pause, not surprise, just interest. Most people don't hire a PI after half a century. I'm not most people, Mildred said. Megan chuckled softly. No, I don't suppose you are. When can we meet? Tomorrow, Mildred said. My place, 9 a.m. I'll bring coffee. Bring questions instead. Before she hung up, Mildred added, I think my typewriter is trying to tell me something. Another pause. Yeah, Megan said. That happens more than you'd think. When the call ended, Mildred looked again at the letter from 1968. She read the last line again. I'm not imagining this. She folded it carefully, slipped it into a manila envelope, and placed it beside the typewriter. The house creaked in the cold. Somewhere above, the wind swept past the shingles like fingers brushing a piano. Tomorrow, she thought, would not be quiet. The first time Megan saw the typewriter, she paused at the door as though someone had said her name from the shadows. It sat beneath the front window, bathed in the same gold-stained light that had watched over Mildred's youth. The Royal Quiet Deluxe Model 1947. Olive green enamel chipped near the return lever ribbon replaced but misaligned. A small crack on the left platen knob. To anyone else, it was just an antique. To Megan, it was a flash of memory. Her mother hunched over one exactly like it, chain-smoking, tapping out letters to her brother who never wrote back. "That's the same model my mom used," Megan murmured. Mildred didn't look up. "A lot of mothers used it." "No," Megan said, stepping closer, her voice unconsciously softer. "It's not the same model. It's the same wear, the same dent in the frame, same way the shift key sticks on the right." She reached out but stopped short of touching it. "May I?" Mildred nodded once. Megan pressed the shift key. It stuck. She stared at it for a beat too long, then cleared her throat. "We'll need to trace the document, that letter the typewriter produced, dates, names, anything that links it to a real archive. You said you didn't remember writing it." "I didn't," Mildred said. "But I recognize the tone. That kind of desperate honesty only shows up when you know no one's going to read it." Megan looked back at her. "You're a writer." "I was a teacher," Mildred corrected. "But I wrote when I didn't want to scream." They sat at the table, the old paper between them. Megan had brought her laptop, a fingerprint scanner, and a copy of Vermont State Archive access permissions, though it was clear Mildred didn't care about protocol. "What do you know about your son's medical history?" Megan asked. Mildred didn't blink. "He had asthma when he was 4. A bee sting almost killed him. Beyond that, nothing. He vanished at 5. I wasn't allowed to know what came next." Megan opened a database, restricted subscription only intended for law enforcement and licensed investigators. She began cross-referencing the name Walter Raymond Whitmore. Date of birth, July 12, 1963. There were no death records, no Social Security suspensions, but there was something. She leaned in. "Got a hit, not a match, but a proximity flag." "What does that mean?" Mildred asked. "It means someone with either a partial name or matching birth date had medical records pulled recently." "Where?" Megan hesitated, checking the encryption. "State of Maine. A facility called West Grove Assisted Living. Someone accessed files for a male patient registered under a different name, but the flag popped because of his age and overlapping maternal info." "Maternal info." "Your name," Megan said. "Your name showed up in an auxiliary field, possibly as part of an emergency contact form that never got filled out." Mildred leaned forward, but her voice was a whisper. "Is he alive?" "I don't know," Megan said carefully. "But someone thought enough of that field to type your name." The air between them thickened. Megan didn't press. She was good at reading what silence meant. In this house, silence didn't mean stillness. It meant restraint. "You really believe it's possible?" Mildred asked finally. Megan exhaled. "It's possible. And even if it's not him, someone used your name. That's a trail. Trails don't form out of nowhere." That night, Mildred couldn't sleep. She sat in the study, wrapped in her thickest robe, the cold gnawing at the edges of the baseboards. The house made sounds again, old houses always do, but tonight the creaks and knocks felt timed, deliberate, like punctuation. She stood, walked to the typewriter, and stared. It stared back. For a long time, nothing. Then, clack, just one key. Then another. She didn't reach for it, just watched. Letter by letter, the paper filled slowly. "Do you remember Red Bear, the one you named?" Her breath caught in her throat. She hadn't spoken that name in over 50 years. It wasn't a toy. It was a patchwork monstrosity she'd sewn herself out of leftover corduroy and a ripped apron. One ear bigger than the other. One eye a mismatched button. She made it for Walter when he got the flu and cried at night. Called it Red Bear because of the color. He loved it like it was real. He carried it everywhere. Until the day he disappeared. Nobody outside the family ever knew about that toy. Mildred sat down hard, her legs folding too fast beneath her. The paper finished its sentence. She touched it, trembling, and whispered, "Yes, I remember." At dawn, she called Megan. "We're going to Maine," she said. "No small talk, huh?" Megan replied. "All right, I'll gas up the car." "No, we're not driving your car." "Why not?" "Because Brenda knows your car. She follows things, patterns. She's always followed my bank account, my phone records, my friends. We go quiet or we don't go at all." Megan whistled softly. "You've got sharper instincts than some of my clients 30 years younger." "I was a teacher for 40 years, Mildred said. "You learn to read people who say one thing and mean another." That afternoon, she asked Megan to come to the bank with her. The teller raised her eyebrows when Mildred requested the withdrawal, $11,300. "Are you sure, Mrs. Whitmore?" "Dead certain," she replied. They walked outside. Megan was about to hand the envelope back, but Mildred stopped her. "No," she said, "you keep it." Megan frowned. "Ma'am, that's not—" "If I disappear," Mildred said, "or if I lose my mind halfway through this and start talking to lamps, you make sure someone finishes what we start." "I don't." "You said your mother used this same typewriter," Mildred continued. "Maybe this thing connects more than timelines. Maybe it connects people who were never supposed to meet. Maybe it chose you." Megan stared at her. "I'm not crazy," Mildred said. "I don't think you are." "Good, because we're going to Maine, and I don't want to do it alone." "You won't," Megan said. They stood on the porch for a long minute, Vermont wind curling around their ankles. Inside, the typewriter sat dormant, but the page remained. "Red Bear still smells like you." And that was enough. The rain started somewhere around Concord. It wasn't the soft kind that whispered against the windshield. It was the stubborn, relentless sort that blurred every tree, every mile marker, every thought. Megan's wipers worked overtime, swiping at the fogged glass like they were trying to peel away more than water. They had left Burlington before sunrise. No fanfare, no notes left on the fridge, just Mildred's old suitcase in the trunk and a Ziploc bag with peanut butter crackers in her lap. She had insisted on packing them herself. Mildred stared out the window, her hands folded, eyes unfocused. "I used to teach poetry to 12-year-olds, she said suddenly. Megan glanced at her. "Yeah, back when they still let teachers talk about metaphor without getting a letter from the school board." Mildred smiled faintly. "I made them memorize Emily Dickinson. Half of them hated it. The other half never said a word, but started writing their own little poems on the backs of math homework." "Sounds like you were good at it." "I wasn't," Mildred said. "But I was stubborn, and sometimes stubborn is all a child needs to believe you won't quit on them." Megan nodded, keeping her eyes on the road. "Walter used to sit in my classroom after school." Mildred continued, her voice softer now. "He'd gather the chalkboard erasers and bang them together outside, sending clouds into the wind like smoke signals." A pause. "He wanted to be a teacher," she added. "What kind?" Megan asked. "The kind who never made kids raise their hands." Mildred chuckled. "He once said to me, 'If I ever run a classroom, I'll give every kid their own chalkboard so no one has to be afraid of speaking up.'" Megan smiled, then reached down to turn the heat up. "Sounds like a good one." "He was," Mildred whispered. "He was 5, and I could already tell. There was a kindness in him. Not the performative kind children learn, the quiet watching kind." They drove for another hour before either of them spoke again. Megan broke the silence this time. "My mom got pregnant at 20. Catholic family. No money. No husband. Her parents gave her a choice, give the baby up or leave the house." Mildred looked over, eyebrows slightly raised. "She gave the baby up. Then left anyway," Megan said. "She never told me much more. I found the hospital records by accident when I was 16. You ever try to find him? I didn't even know if it was a boy or girl. The documents were partial, redacted. But I always wondered." Another silence. "I guess that's why this case stuck with me," Megan admitted. "When you called, something in my gut shifted. Like maybe I owed her something, maybe I still do." They crossed into Maine just as the rain turned to mist. The sun broke through in pieces, slanting through the pine trees like judgment. It was quiet country here, the kind that had no time for tourists, but no energy to reject them either. West Grove Assisted Living stood at the top of a narrow hill outside Ellsworth, tucked between 2 rows of weather-beaten maples. The building wasn't much white vinyl siding, the smell of soup and disinfectant wafting through the entryway, but it was clean, orderly, and still. The woman at the front desk was maybe 30, with a kind smile and a badge that read Clara. "We're here to ask about a resident," Megan said, flashing her investigator's license. "Someone who might have been admitted years ago under the name William R." Clara frowned, tapping her keyboard. "William R.," she repeated. "We have a William Richards. Been here since, let me see, 1984. Megan glanced at Mildred, who was already gripping the edge of the counter. "Came in after a car accident," Clara continued. "Had no ID, no memory, no one claimed him. He was in and out of rehab centers until he stabilized. He's been quiet, keeps to himself, no visitors, doesn't talk much." "Can we see him?" Mildred asked. Clara hesitated. "He's in the East Wing, room 12. I'll buzz you through." Megan thanked her. Mildred didn't say a word as they followed the hallway, its walls lined with pastel paintings of lighthouses and sailing ships. The scent of talcum powder mixed with something faintly metallic. Mildred walked slowly as though each step risked waking something she wasn't ready to meet. They stopped outside room 12. The door was ajar. Inside, a man sat in a chair by the window facing the trees. He had gray hair cut short. His shoulders were hunched, his posture compact but not frail. A book rested in his lap, unopened. Mildred stepped in. The man didn't move, William Megan said gently. He turned. The face was older, the skin more weathered, but the eyes, brown deep unsure, were familiar. Mildred's breath caught. Her eyes locked on a faint mark near his left ear. A birthmark, small oval, slightly red, like the one Walter had. She remembered kissing it when he was sick. She remembered him crying when another kid teased him for it. William stared at her. "I know you," he said. Mildred didn't breathe. "You do?" she managed to whisper. "I don't know how," he said slowly. "But I've seen you. In dreams. In something," he replied. A hallway, a window, a smell. He closed his eyes for a second, his face tightening as if grasping at threads in fog. "There was a toy," he said. Red, with one button eye, smelled like soap and cinnamon. Mildred's knees gave out. She sank into the chair across from him, hands trembling. "I made you that bear," she said. "It was the only toy you didn't throw across the room." William looked at her again. "I've had dreams," he said quietly, "of a house, wooden, a porch, and something tapping, like clicking." "A typewriter," she whispered. He nodded slowly. Megan stood near the door, watching still and reverent. Mildred reached forward, her hand hovering in the air between them. "I'm Mildred," she said. "I'm your—" William flinched slightly, not from fear, from resistance. Like the name alone was too much weight for the scaffolding of memory to carry. "I don't remember you," he said. "I know," she replied, "but I remember you." They sat there for minutes, saying nothing more. Outside the window, the trees shuddered in the breeze, and for the first time in 57 years, Mildred was close enough to her son to hear him breathe. The next morning, West Grove smelled like lemon disinfectant and oatmeal. Nurses moved down the hall like ghosts in white sneakers, their voices low and practiced already on the third shift of the week, and halfway to forgetting the names of the very people they served. Mildred arrived at room 12, holding the typewriter like it was a relic, cradled in both arms, covered in a soft wool shawl. Megan had offered to carry it, but Mildred refused. If he doesn't remember my face, she'd said he might remember the sound. Walter, still William in the paperwork, was by the window again, staring at the gray sky like it might give him answers. He didn't react when they entered. Megan set a chair near the small writing table, plugging in the extension cord. Mildred placed the typewriter gently down. She took her seat, adjusted the paper roll, and paused. Walter turned towards the sound. "That's what do you call it?" he asked. "A typewriter," Mildred replied, her fingers already resting on the keys. "Old machine," he murmured. "No screen." "No screen," she agreed, "but it never forgets what you write. Not unless you rip it out." Megan stepped back, letting them take the space. Mildred didn't start typing right away. She waited, watched him. His face, though changed by time, held echoes, creases that folded in familiar directions, a faint indent on the chin, that same way he blinked too slowly when thinking. It wasn't just resemblance. It was rhythm. Walter's fingers tapped unconsciously on the windowsill as if searching for a tempo he'd lost. Finally, she pressed the first key. Clack. Then another. And another. The machine spoke. "Red Bear. First time you cried, I sewed his ear back on." Walter didn't move at first. Then his lips parted, soundless. The rhythm on the windowsill stopped. He turned slowly, looking at the typewriter, then at her, then back again. "What did you say?" She didn't answer. She just typed more. "You slept holding him so tight the threads came loose, but you never let go." His eyes shimmered. "I had a toy," he whispered. "Red, not a real red, like brown trying to be red." "Yes," Mildred said. Her voice cracked. "It had a button, eye, and a string coming loose on the leg." "Yes." He looked at her, really looked. Did my mother have silver hair like yours?" Mildred's throat tightened. "She did," she said. Walter blinked hard. "I don't remember her voice," he confessed. "I remember a song, I think. But not the words, just the hum. She would hum something while cooking." Mildred's eyes brimmed and she nodded. "I'll be seeing you," she said softly, "by Billie Holiday." He closed his eyes and nodded. The memory was a cloud loose, barely formed, but real enough to sting. You're not her, he said. I am, she replied. He pulled back, confusion surfacing. No, that can't be. That doesn't make sense. I know. You're not her, he repeated, less certain. I don't expect you to believe me, not yet. Silence. Megan, standing by the doorway, watched the moment unfold like a tightrope walk. One wrong word and everything would collapse back into forgetfulness. Mildred didn't push. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a tiny fabric scrap, a piece of red corduroy frayed at the edges. She placed it beside the typewriter. Walter stared. It's his ear, she said. Walter leaned forward, his hands trembling. I remember holding this, he whispered, but I don't remember why. He stood abruptly, pacing, hands gripping the sides of his head. I don't know who I am, he said. I've never known. People gave me names, called me William, but it never felt right. Never. Mildred rose slowly, careful not to approach too fast. You are Walter, she said. You're my son. You were taken from me. He froze. Taken. Not lost, not given up, not abandoned. Taken. He turned face pale, voice sharp. By who? Mildred didn't answer. But Megan did. She'd been gone most of the morning, running searches, diving into the half-digitized hell of regional adoption records, closed family court transcripts, and private hospital transfers. She stepped forward now, holding a slim file in her hand. Walter was adopted in 1969, she said. Private arrangement. No agency. The man who took him used the name Philip Rhodes. Walter frowned. Rhodes. Mildred inhaled sharply. That's not a stranger, Megan continued. That's your father. Walter turned to her slowly. Your biological father, Megan clarified. Raymond Whitmore. He changed his name after the divorce. Moved 2 states over, filed paperwork to adopt a child through back channels, paid a nurse at a shelter to get it through. Mildred's face drained of color. She reached for the chair but missed falling to her knees. Megan rushed forward. Walter hesitated, then dropped beside her. I'm all right, Mildred whispered, her hands shaking. I didn't know. I thought he left. I thought he ran. But he didn't leave me. He stole Walter. Walter stared at her. I don't remember him, he said. Megan's voice was flat. You wouldn't. He died in 2001. Heart failure. No will. No estate. Nothing but debts and a fake name. Mildred was still on the floor, hands clenched in her lap. He said I was unfit. Said no judge would side with me. But he didn't fight for custody. He just waited. Then one day Gloria called in sick, and he showed up, said he was taking Walter for ice cream. He never brought him back. Her voice cracked. I didn't know how to explain that to anyone, so I didn't. Walter sat beside her, quiet. Why didn't you come for me? He asked. She looked at him, tears spilling freely now. I tried, she said, but no one believed me. And then the police said you were probably dead, and I started to believe them. He looked away. Megan handed him the file. These are the adoption documents. You were listed under your middle name. Walter Raymond became William Ray. It wasn't even clever. Walter read the top page, but the words blurred. I've lived my whole life wondering why I couldn't remember a beginning, he said. Turns out it was stolen. He looked at Mildred again. I don't remember you, he said. I don't need you to, she replied. I just want to give you back what they took. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. Inside room 12, a mother and her stolen son sat on the floor beside a 70-year-old typewriter that for once was silent. It started with a voicemail. Mildred had left her flip phone in the kitchen drawer at home like she always did. She hadn't used it since 2018, and only kept it because Brenda insisted she might break a hip one day and need to call for help. But that morning back in Burlington, Brenda had called 4 times. Then again. No answer. Mildred never went 24 hours without checking in, especially not with Lucy's condition supposedly growing worse by the week. By the 5th call, Brenda's anxiety had stopped resembling concern and started resembling rage. She didn't even wait for Lucy to wake up. They were in the car by 6:15 a.m. heading north. Brenda drove with the kind of fury that disguised itself as purpose, teeth, clenched fingers strangling the steering wheel phone screen, glowing with GPS directions to a place called West Grove. Lucy sat in the passenger seat, headphones in, but not playing music, eyes fixed on the road like she was trying to memorize the trees. She always does this, Brenda muttered under her breath. Runs off, disappears, thinks it's some great mystery she's allowed to have. Meanwhile, I'm the one fixing everything, cleaning up, "She's not a mess," Lucy said quietly. Brenda didn't answer. She rarely did when contradicted, especially by her own daughter. By the time they reached the hill outside Ellsworth, the clouds had thickened into bruises. A storm was coming not of weather, but of consequence. Inside West Grove, Mildred was sitting in the reading room with Walter reading aloud from an old poetry book. Megan sat nearby scanning her laptop, her attention flicking every few seconds toward the hallway. She had a feeling. Brenda's voice arrived before her body did. "You have got to be kidding me." She stormed into the room like a lawyer into a courtroom, already loud, already certain, already ready to win. "Mother," she said sharply, hands on hips, "what in God's name are you doing here?" Mildred looked up composed. "I'm visiting someone." Brenda's eyes darted to Walter, then Megan, then back to her mother. "You ran away," she spat. "No calls, no texts, nothing." Lucy was worried sick. Lucy, standing behind her, winced. Mildred stood slow but firm. "I didn't run away. I walked out." "Oh, don't do this. Don't do the dramatic matriarch thing. You're not in a novel, Mom." Walter watched confused, his hands twitching slightly. Brenda pointed at him. "Is that him? Is that the imaginary son who died 50 years ago? Did your haunted typewriter tell you he's a ghost now?" "It's him," Mildred said, quiet, "sure." Brenda let out a laugh with no humor. "You're not well. This is what I've been saying. You're slipping. You're making up stories. Letting this woman—" She jabbed a finger toward Megan. "Fill your head with conspiracies." Megan stood slowly. "I'm a licensed investigator." "Oh, good for you," Brenda snapped. "Do you solve a lot of cases involving magical office supplies?" Lucy took a step forward. "Mom, stop." Brenda turned sharply. "Don't you dare. Not now." But Lucy didn't stop. Her voice grew stronger. "You're embarrassing yourself. And her." "She's not well," Brenda hissed. "She's being manipulated." "She's lucid," Megan cut in. "I've spoken to her for hours. Her story checks out. And I have records to back it up." Brenda's eyes narrowed. "What records?" Megan pulled out a manila folder. For starters, documents showing that the man who adopted Walter under the name William was Mildred's ex-husband. Brenda's mouth twitched, but she didn't respond. Megan went on calm and brutal. "And then there's this." She pulled out a printed hospital intake form. "This is a falsified document you submitted to Brattleboro General listing Lucy as having progressive scoliosis and requiring an urgent operation." Brenda's eyes went wide. I called the hospital." Megan interrupted. "There's no such diagnosis on record, and your insurance never processed any requests for surgical consultations. The entire thing is fabricated." Brenda lunged towards the folder, but Megan was faster. "You've been using your daughter's invented medical condition to extort your mother into signing over the house," she said flatly. Mildred didn't flinch. She already knew. Somewhere deep down she had always known. But now Lucy knew too. The girl stepped away from her mother. "You lied," she whispered. "About all of it." Brenda spun to face her. "You needed sympathy, Lucy. You needed support. The world doesn't give a damn unless you bleed in front of them." "That's not support," Lucy said, her voice breaking. "That's theft." Walter rose slowly, uneasy. "Is everything all right?" Brenda turned to him, eyes filled with something darker than anger. "You don't even remember her," she sneered. "You don't know what she is. You're just another pawn." Mildred stepped between them. "Leave." Brenda laughed bitterly. "Oh, you'd love that. Wouldn't you finally cut me out of everything? Live in your fantasy world with your make-believe son. He's real," Mildred said. "He's standing right in front of you, and you don't have to believe it. You just have to leave." Brenda's face twisted. "You think you're winning something here? You think he'll love you for this? He doesn't even know who you are." "I don't need him to love me," Mildred said. "I just need him to know the truth." Silence fell like a door slamming shut. Brenda looked around, realizing the room had changed, that she had lost control. Lucy wasn't behind her anymore. Megan wasn't afraid of her. Walter wasn't a ghost. And Mildred, her mother, her shield, her scapegoat, had finally stepped out of her shadow. Security arrived minutes later, called by Clara at the front desk. Brenda was escorted outside, still ranting, still warning everyone of the lawsuits coming. Lucy stayed behind. When the doors closed, she turned to Mildred. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I thought she was just trying to help me. I didn't know she—" Mildred wrapped her arms around the girl and held her tightly. "I know, sweetheart," she said. "But now you do. And that means you get to decide who you want to be next." Outside, the clouds cracked open and rain began to fall soft, this time cleansing. Inside, for the first time in decades, Mildred was not the one being erased. The official report came the following morning, printed in duplicate, and slid across a formica table by a deputy with tired eyes and the posture of someone used to bad news. Megan sat across from him, jaw set, watching as he laid out the arrest summary like a grocery list. Brenda Whitmore falsifying medical documents, attempted financial exploitation of an elder, abuse of guardianship status. The language was formal, sterile, but every word had weight. She's being held at the county facility for now, the deputy said, tapping his pen once. She'll be processed for arraignment next week. Depending on what the DA wants to pursue, this could go from a slap on the wrist to something real. Jail time's not off the table. Mildred nodded, her face unreadable. Lucy sat beside her, small and pale hands fidgeting with the cuff of her sweatshirt. She hadn't spoken since the drive over. Megan turned to her. "You okay?" Lucy nodded too fast, then stopped. "I thought she was trying to save me," she whispered. "But it was all theater." "She's your mother," Mildred said gently, "and it's okay to be confused." Lucy looked up. "She's not who I thought she was." Mildred offered a soft, weathered smile. "None of us are. That's what family means. Learning the truth and choosing to stay or walk away." Lucy didn't answer, but she reached for Mildred's hand, and that said more than words could. Later that afternoon, they returned to West Grove. Walter had asked to see the garden. It wasn't much, just a patch of overgrown grass, a wooden bench, and a single apple tree that had stopped blooming years ago. But he said the open sky helped him think. He stood under the tree now, hand resting on the trunk, eyes half closed. "I used to climb something like this," he murmured. "Fell once and scraped my arm so bad I cried all night." Mildred stood a few feet behind him, silent. "I remember you yelling from the porch," Walter said. "You said the apples weren't ripe, that I was too impatient." She exhaled shakily. "You always were." He turned slowly. His eyes weren't wet, but they shimmered with something new, recognition trying to find its footing. "I remember a porch swing," he said, "with a plaid cushion and a smell ink maybe, or glue." Mildred smiled. "Typewriter ribbon. It bleeds a little if you change it too soon." He stared at her, uncertain but open. "I couldn't find words," he said, "all these years. There were letters I tried to write, but they never made sense. They were always missing something." Mildred reached into her coat pocket and handed him a folded paper, yellowed, worn. Megan had found it in one of the old files from the facility. It had been buried among blank forms and intake notes. A letter scrawled in uneven handwriting. Walter opened it slowly. Mother, do you remember the red bear? Why can't I remember your face? I think I had a sister, or maybe a dog, or maybe both. I don't know. Please write me back, even if I forget again." There was no signature, just a faint thumbprint at the bottom. Walter looked up, holding the page like it was made of glass. "I wrote this," Megan nodded. "You did. Years ago, right after a seizure. The nurse said you were disoriented, kept asking for someone named Mommy Teacher. They thought it was nonsense." Walter pressed the page to his chest. Mildred moved forward inch by inch until they were inches apart. "You don't have to remember all of it," she said. "Memories aren't love. They're just shadows of it. The love is still here." He didn't speak. He just wrapped his arms around her. It wasn't tight, it wasn't clean, but it was real. Lucy watched from this garden path. She said nothing, just let the moment happen. Back inside, Megan sat in the common room staring at the arrest file again. It didn't feel like justice, not really. It felt like a door closing too late to stop the storm, but early enough to keep the embers from spreading. Mildred entered a few minutes later. "She'll go to court," Megan said. "I know. They'll ask if you want to press additional charges." "I won't." Megan looked up. "Are you sure?" "I'm tired," Mildred said. "I don't want my final chapter to be about punishment. She tried to ruin you. She tried to survive, in her way." Megan raised an eyebrow. "She's not a villain, Megan. She's a daughter who never felt chosen. She learned how to take because no one ever taught her how to ask." Silence. "And Lucy," Megan asked. "She's still choosing who to be, but now at least she gets to choose honestly." Megan closed the folder. Outside, the clouds began to break. Light spilled through in fractured gold, illuminating the worn floor and the wrinkles in Mildred's face. Walter entered, holding the letter. "She should keep this," he said, handing it to Mildred. "Not for me, for her story." Mildred took it, eyes warm. "It's your story, too." He nodded. Maybe someday it'll feel that way. Lucy came in behind him. She didn't say anything, but she walked straight to Mildred and hugged her again. "Grandma," she whispered. It was the first time she'd said it out loud. Mildred didn't cry. She simply held on. Outside, somewhere beyond the tree line, the wind began to change. And for the first time in 57 years, everything that had been stolen began piece by piece to come home. It had rained the night before Brenda's court date, one of those Maine downpours that soaked the earth like it needed to forget something. The courthouse in Ellsworth was small, a converted colonial building with wood paneling and pew-like benches. It smelled faintly of lemon oil and fatigue. Brenda sat with her arms crossed, eyes fixed forward. No makeup, no jewelry. Her hair pinned back as if she were attending a funeral and not her own sentencing. The judge, an older woman with tired eyes and a sharp tongue, read the findings aloud with the cadence of someone who'd seen one too many family betrayals to be surprised anymore. Forgery, elder exploitation, abuse of guardianship. But because Mildred had declined to press additional charges, refused restitution, refused prison, the sentence was light. 18 months of probation, no unsupervised access to her mother, no contact regarding assets, a restraining order signed and stamped. Brenda never looked at Mildred during the hearing. Mildred sat still in the front row, spine straight, hands folded, eyes dry. Not cold, just resolute. Afterward, on the courthouse steps, Lucy stood between them, as if part of her still hoped something might break open, spill out, soften. "Will you be okay?" she asked her mother. Brenda lit a cigarette she'd promised never to touch again. She didn't answer right away. Then she exhaled sharply through her nose and said, "They'll move on eventually." Lucy flinched just slightly. She didn't say goodbye, just turned and walked down the steps to where Megan was waiting in the car. Mildred stayed behind for a moment, watching her daughter, the woman who had once been a frightened teenager in a too-big coat on her doorstep, disappear into a city bus. She didn't feel triumph, just release. That night, Lucy packed her things, what little she had, and moved into her father's apartment on the other side of town. He was a quiet man with a dull job in insurance and a fondness for baking. She hadn't seen much of him growing up. Brenda hadn't allowed it. But when she walked into the apartment, he hugged her, like someone trying to make up for a decade in a single breath. "You don't have to explain anything," he said. And she didn't. Back at West Grove, life settled into a rhythm both strange and comforting. Mildred didn't move into Walter's room. That would have been too fast, too heavy. Instead, she took a small unit down the hall, room 6A. It had a window facing the same orchard, and just enough space for her books, her slippers, and the typewriter. Every morning she knocked gently on Walter's door. He always answered, sometimes in a sweater, sometimes still in flannel. He always smiled like he didn't quite know why but knew it mattered. And every morning she read to him, one chapter a day from the manuscript she'd been working on, pieced together from memory journal fragments, old classroom notes and typewriter confessions. She didn't start at the beginning. She started with the middle, when everything fell apart, because that was where the story was truest. Walter listened with his eyes closed most of the time. Sometimes when she paused to sip tea, he'd murmur a word or finish a sentence without realizing. He still didn't say Mom, not out of resistance. It just wasn't there yet. The wiring hadn't fused. But one afternoon, after a chapter about Red Bear's missing ear and the thunderstorm that followed, he looked at her for a long time and said, "You feel like someone I once loved." She smiled, closed the book, and replied, "You still do." Later that week, Megan came to visit. She had moved out of her tiny studio apartment in Burlington and was renting a cottage 10 miles away, closer to the coast. A place with a porch, an old kettle, and more peace than she'd allowed herself in years. She brought a leather-bound notebook and a recorder. "I want to write it," she said. Mildred looked at her over her glasses. "Write what?" This Megan said. "You, him, the typewriter, the forgetting and the remembering." Mildred raised an eyebrow. "You think anyone would believe it?" "I'm not writing it for belief," Megan said. "I'm writing it so no one gets to erase it again." They spent afternoons together now, Megan interviewing her like a journalist, Mildred recounting pieces she hadn't spoken aloud in decades. How she met Raymond, how she lost him, how she lost herself after Walter disappeared. How guilt became wallpaper, something always there, always quiet, but impossible to remove. Megan recorded it all, transcribed each word by hand. The working title was The Teacher and the Machine, but that changed when Mildred read the first chapter aloud and ended with a line Megan hadn't written. To the child who forgot me but whom I never forgot, this is for you. That became the first line of the book. The opening page read, Dear son, you once held a bear with one button eye and thought it was brave because it never blinked. You were right. Bravery is in the not blinking, in the staying. I didn't always stay, but I always searched. And this is how I found you. The book was never meant for the public, but Megan, moved by something deeper than logic, submitted the first chapters anonymously to a small press in Portland that specialized in personal memoirs and stories that shouldn't have survived. The editor called back the next day in tears. They printed 500 copies. The first was given to Walter. He didn't read it, not because he couldn't, but because Mildred read it to him one page at a time every night at sunset. I don't remember the first 5 years, he told her one evening, but I remember every word you've read to me since. And that's enough, she replied. In the community room at West Grove, the book sat on the shelf beside puzzle boxes and crossword collections. Occasionally a nurse would pick it up, flip through a few pages, and ask Mildred quietly if it was true. She always answered the same way. It's as true as memory allows. On the porch, Walter sat in a rocking chair, blanket over his legs, the typewriter beside him. He never typed much, just one sentence which he wrote over and over. I once forgot who I was, but I never stopped being loved. And as far as truths go, that was more than enough. The past hadn't been erased, but it had been rethreaded, rewoven. Not perfectly, but faithfully. And sometimes that's the closest we get to forgiveness. The typewriter had been moved, no longer perched in Mildred's private study or humming quietly in the corner of her suite. It now sat in the reading room of West Grove Assisted Living near the wide window that overlooked the overgrown apple tree. Walter requested it himself. He said it helped him think. Every Tuesday and Thursday morning after oatmeal and before his short walk around the garden, he would wheel himself to the desk and type. Not fast, not fluid. Sometimes he'd spend 20 minutes on a single sentence, but it wasn't about pace. It was about memory. The staff knew to leave him be. The first time someone tried to ask what he was working on, he stared at them for a long moment and said, I'm rearranging the sky. They stopped asking. Most days the pages he typed were brief. One line, sometimes two. The porch was green when it rained. She used to say apples tasted better in July. I had a dog, I think, or a neighbor's dog. He followed me home and never left. Fragments like glass pulled from a storm drain, shiny and dangerous, but beautiful too. Mildred collected them all, kept them in a binder sorted by date, annotated in the margins with tiny blue ink corrections. She didn't change the words, just added punctuation. It's not rewriting, she told Megan one afternoon. It's giving his thoughts a place to breathe. But it wasn't just Walter who was writing now. Mildred had started a class. It began with just 2 residents, Mrs. Lafferty, who once taught French at a university, and now forgot her own daughter's name, and Carl, who had been a mailman for 43 years, and could still recite every zip code in Hancock County. She called it Memory in Motion. Every Saturday afternoon at 300 in the community room beside the puzzle table, she'd gather them, pass out pencils and paper, and ask a question. Describe the first smell you remember. Write about the last time you danced. Tell me the name you wish someone had called you. Some wrote stories, others poems. Most wrote scattered words, honeysuckle, blue raincoat left behind. Mildred never corrected, she only encouraged. Megan brought in a small recorder and started taping each session. Not for profit, not even for posterity, just so that if those words slipped away again, they'd still be somewhere. It's like bottling lightning, Megan said. No, Mildred replied. It's like planting seeds. By the 4th week, the group had grown to 10. One woman named Connie had been mute for 6 months. She wrote a full page about her wedding cake. It was lemon. Outside of West Grove, Megan had been busy. She printed the manuscript, bound it in matte cardstock. Simple. Unassuming. On the cover, a black and white photograph of the typewriter, the ribbon slightly askew. She sent it to 3 small publishing houses. 2 weeks later, she got a call. A senior editor at Field and Slate Press asked if the story was real. Every word, Megan said. They requested a meeting, flew out to Maine, sat in the reading room beside the typewriter and listened as Walter read aloud from the binder of his fragments. They offered a deal on the spot. Not a huge advance, not a movie contract, but a promised distribution, a launch reading at their Boston location, and a full-color run of 1,000 copies. When Megan told Mildred, she just blinked. Books used to mean something, she said softly. They still do, Megan replied. That night, Mildred returned to her room and sat before a fresh page. She'd been avoiding a particular chapter for weeks. It sat there in the outline, waiting, staring. Chapter 11, If You'd Never Been Taken. She rolled in the paper, rested her fingers on the keys, and began. If you'd never been taken, Walter, maybe you would have hated me. Maybe I would have scolded you for dropping your socks on the stairs or not calling when you were late. Maybe we would have fought at 17 and not spoken for 3 years, only to reconcile when you had a son of your own. Maybe you would have disappointed me. Maybe I would have disappointed you. Maybe we would have laughed so hard on your 30th birthday we forgot who we used to be. She paused. Outside it had started to snow. The kind of snowfall that came quietly blanketing rooftops and regret with equal weight. She kept typing. But you were taken, and I was shattered. And somehow here we are. In the morning she found a letter under her door. It was written in neat, careful script. Dear Grandma Mildred, I've started sleeping through the night again. Dad and I make pancakes on Sundays. I'm learning how to drive. I still mess up the mirrors, but I'll get there. I thought about what you said. About how truth isn't always gentle, but it's always necessary. You showed me what it means to choose integrity even when it costs you family. I didn't know that kind of strength existed before I met you. Thank you. Love, Lucy. Mildred read it 3 times, then folded it carefully and placed it in a photo album beside a picture of Walter at 5, grinning Red Bear in his lap. Later that day she returned to the reading room. Walter was already there typing. He handed her the page as she walked in. There was always a tree outside my window, but I think I only just now realized it was the same tree. She smiled. Do you want me to read? She asked. No, he said. You've done enough reading. He picked up the page again. I think it's time I remembered how to say things myself. And with that he began to read, slowly, clearly, to the woman he once forgot, but never lost. The snow began just after dawn, drifting down like the sky had finally exhaled. West Grove's grounds, once dull and brittle with the leftover bones of fall, turned into something hushed and sacred. The orchard disappeared beneath a soft white sheet. The apple tree, long dead, stood like a monument in the center of it all. Inside room 6A, the radiator hummed faintly. Mildred sat at her desk facing the wall where a painting hung done in watercolor and memory, trembling brush strokes that captured a porch wrapped in golden leaves. Her old house, the one Brenda wanted to sell, the one that had raised Walter for 5 years and haunted her for 50 more. She stared at it like she was waiting for it to speak. The room was filled with the scent of cinnamon tea and the distant sound of music, familiar notes drifting through the hallway. Walter. He was playing the piano in the common room again. No one had taught him, at least not in any way he remembered. But some mornings he'd sit at the upright Yamaha and let his fingers wander. He didn't know the names of the keys or the scales, but his body knew something his mind didn't. Muscle memory or miracle, no one knew which. Today the song was slower, sadder. Mildred stood slipped on her shawl and followed the melody down the corridor. The doors to the common room were propped open, letting the sound flow freely. Walter was hunched over the keys, his back to the room, head bowed as if praying to the music itself. She recognized it instantly. I'll Be Seeing You, the same song she used to hum while folding laundry, while cooking, while brushing Walter's hair and telling him about the stars. He had no reason to remember it, but he played it perfectly. She didn't speak, just listened, until the last note faded. Walter turned and saw her. He didn't smile right away, just nodded. I think that one came from somewhere good, he said. Mildred walked over and sat beside him. You played it just like I used to hum it. He looked at her. Then maybe I've never forgotten anything. Maybe I just needed to hear it again. They sat in silence, the snow thickening outside. Later that day, Megan stopped by. She didn't knock anymore. She just stepped inside, always gently, as if entering a sacred space. She had a manila folder in her hand, eyebrows furrowed, mouth unsure. I reread the manuscript, she said. The full one. not just the chapters we prepped for the publisher. Mildred looked up from her journal. Megan continued, "You didn't write a memoir, not just that, it's something else." "What do you mean?" It reads like an apology." Mildred set her pen down. Megan flipped open the folder and read aloud. "I blamed myself for not screaming louder, for trusting the wrong man, for looking away the moment the silence grew too large to bear. I blamed myself for not bleeding when the world expected it. But I am learning that being broken is not the same as being guilty. And I am learning that forgiveness, the hardest kind, is the kind you have to give to the woman in the mirror." She looked up. "You wrote that like someone pleading for a second chance." "I was," Mildred said. Megan nodded, emotion flickering across her face. "And I think the world needs to read it." "It's not for the world," Mildred said. "It's for Walter. But it could help someone." Mildred thought for a long moment, eyes on the painting of the porch. "Then let it help quietly," she said. "No press tours, no documentaries, just shelves, quiet ones, where someone might pick it up when they need to say I'm sorry and don't know how." Megan understood. Before she left, she slipped something from her coat pocket. "Lucy asked me to bring this." It was a photocopy of a birth certificate. Walter Raymond Whitmore, born July 12, 1963, father unknown. Mildred stared at the line, unknown. "She had the record amended," Megan said softly. "She said no one else deserved to have their name next to yours on that page." Mildred held the paper like it was warm. "She didn't have to do that. She said you did." There was a knock later that evening. Soft, familiar. "Lucy." She stepped inside without a word, hair damp from snow cheeks, pink from cold. "I wanted to see you," she said. Mildred opened her arms. The hug was different this time, not desperate, not uncertain. It was steady, certain. "I'm okay," Lucy whispered. "I know." They sat together, tea steaming between them. "I'm studying nursing," Lucy said. "There's a program downtown. I start in January." Mildred smiled. "Your mother would hate that." "I know," Lucy said. "But I don't want to be like her. I want to be steady for someone else. Maybe a child. Maybe a patient, I don't know. But steady." "You already are." Lucy pulled out a small envelope. Inside a letter. "Dear Grandma Mildred, the truth used to scare me. I thought it would cost me everything. But now I know that silence costs more. That pretending kindness can be faked is worse than facing what's broken. Thank you for showing me how to live without pretending. I love you. Lucy." Mildred folded it slowly, slid it between the pages of her manuscript. The snow kept falling. Walter kept playing. And somewhere deep inside, the woman who once believed she'd lost everything realized she had found what mattered most, a way back in. Not to the past, but to herself. It was the kind of morning that moved in slow silence, the kind that made the world feel wrapped in wool. The snow had stopped sometime in the night, but the frost still clung to the windows like breath held too long. In room 6A, the radiator clicked and hissed its tired rhythm while Mildred finished folding the last of her sweaters. Her desk had been cleared. Not emptied, never that, but arranged. Stacked pages in neat piles, the original handwritten drafts wrapped in ribbon. The printed version, proofed, formatted, signed off by the publisher, lay open to the dedication page. Megan had dropped it off the night before, still warm from the press. She moved with calm purpose. A rhythm honed from decades of classrooms, from grief measured in to-do lists. On the desk beside the stack sat the old royal typewriter. Its olive green frame still bore the small chip at the ribbon spool. It looked unchanged, eternal even. But today it felt heavier somehow. She slid in a final sheet of paper, crisp white, paused. Her fingers hovered over the keys, then began to type, deliberate, each clack a heartbeat. Memory may fade, but love does not. She stopped, sat back. Read it again. Then with a careful motion she pulled the page free, slid it into the last section of the manuscript, and fastened the binder closed. She exhaled, not tiredly, not wearily, just fully. Outside her window the sun was climbing. It caught the edges of the ice on the glass, casting soft shards of light across the floor. Beyond the frost-glazed pane stood Walter, bundled in a navy coat and scarf. He wasn't moving, just looking up, his breath fogging the air in quiet bursts. He was watching the snow melt. Mildred stood and walked to the window. He looked up and their eyes met. For a long moment nothing passed between them but the quiet. Then Walter smiled, slow, tentative but real, and mouthed a single word. "Mom." She didn't cry. She just nodded as if she'd been waiting for that word her whole life and had finally found peace in the hearing of it, not in the memory but in the present, in the now. He raised one hand in greeting. She pressed hers to the glass, and the world for a moment felt whole. 2 weeks later, The Porch in Vermont, retitled from Megan's original working draft, was released at a small bookstore in Portland. Field and Slate Books. A quiet place tucked between a bakery and an antique shop, the kind of place that always smelled like ink and dust and possibility. They didn't advertise heavily. No press, no signing lines out the door. Just a handwritten flyer in the window, new release. A story about memory, forgiveness, and home. The first printing sold out in 2 days. Inside the store, beneath soft amber lights, the book sat in a window display framed by dried leaves and an old Remington typewriter borrowed from the owner's attic. The cover was simple, a watercolor painting of a yellow porch drenched in autumn light, a typewriter on a wooden table, a single mug of tea beside it. No faces, no people, just presence. Beneath the title, a single line, "To the child who forgot me but whom I never forgot." Customers flipped through pages. Some paused at the chapter titles. Others stopped when they saw a letter addressed to Red Bear. Some cried, quietly. Some bought extra copies for someone who needs this. Mildred didn't attend the launch. She didn't need to. Instead, she spent the day in the reading room watching Walter type. He no longer hesitated. He no longer searched for keys. He wrote, sometimes nonsense, sometimes fragments, but always forward. That afternoon, Megan came in with a brown envelope in her hand. "It's from the Library of Congress," she said, grinning. Mildred opened it slowly. Inside, a letter confirming the cataloging of The Porch in Vermont as part of the National Memoir Archive project. Her words, her story would be preserved not just in memories or hearts, but in shelves built to outlive everyone. She ran her fingers across the embossed seal. "They made room for me," she said. "They had to," Megan replied. "You built it." As evening settled, Mildred returned to her room. She changed into a soft sweater, tied her hair back, and sat at the desk one last time. She didn't bring new paper, didn't load the machine. She just sat and listened. The typewriter was silent, but in her mind it still moved. She could still hear the rhythm, the click-clack, the return slide, the bell at the end of a sentence. It wasn't a machine anymore. It was memory, and memory had done its job. She stood, turned off the lamp, and stepped outside. The snow had stopped completely. The stars were out. And from a room across the hall, a melody rose faintly, Walter playing again. The same song. "I'll be seeing you." Mildred walked slowly toward the sound. Behind her, the room sat still, bathed in moonlight. On the desk, the typewriter remained. And though no hand touched it, if you listened closely, you could almost hear it again. The soft, even tap of keys against paper, like time remembering itself. "Fade out,"